Good evening, everybody. I trust you've had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. So I thought this evening we'd have a look at number 66, which is the simile of the quail, which is really only one of the similes that the Buddha uses. So this discourse is about renunciation and about the fetters. So what we don't renounce becomes a fetter, a chain, something that keeps us locked into this existence. So it begins by telling us that the Buddha is up in the Anguttara country, and at the main city of Apana. And there's also a venerable Udayin. And they both had a day's abiding, having gone out for their alms in the morning. They've had a day's abiding. And Udayin goes to see the Buddha. And before he goes that, he has these reflections. How many painful states has the Blessed One rid us of? How many pleasant states has the Blessed One brought us? How many painful states has the Blessed One rid us of? How many pleasant states has the Blessed One brought us? How many unwholesome states has the Blessed One rid us of, and how many wholesome states the Blessed One brought us? So he mentions this to the Buddha, and he says formally, now just to put you in the picture here, there would have been a time in the early order when a monk or nun would have gone out for food at any time, as many times as they wanted to, and would have eaten at any time of the day they felt they wanted to eat. It was there was no rule about it. But then at some point, the lay people complained to the Buddha and said, look, your monks and nuns, they're coming around at all times, and they're coming out more than once a day. So he made a rule that you had to go out once in the morning and eat by the midday. So now, at this point, it would seem anyway that even though they were going out once in the morning and eating by midday, they would be able to keep some food for the evening. So here, Venerable Sir, formerly, we used to eat in the evening, in the morning, and during the day outside the proper time. Proper time here means the time that the Buddha then set afterwards. So they would eat morning, noon, and in the evening. Now Now there was an occasion the Blessed One addressed the bhikkhus. Bhikkhus, please now. So bhikkhus here actually means the monastics. Please abandon that daytime meal outside the proper time. Now I was upset, Udayin says. I was upset and sad, thinking faithful householders give us good food of various kinds during the day outside the allotted time. Yet the Blessed One tells us to abandon it. The Sublime One tells us to relinquish it. Out of our love and respect for the Blessed One, and out of shame and fear of wrongdoing, we abandon the daytime meal. Now then we ate only in the evening and in the morning. So that was the first rule, that you had to go out in the morning and eat it by midday. Now remember, in the tropics, it gets hot after midday. So it's good to eat before. Normally eating at 11 o'clock is great, because when it gets too hot, you go back to your kuti and have a rest. But then the Blessed One said, please abandon the night meal, which is outside the proper time. And again, the Blessed One tells us to abandon the more sumptuous of the two meals. The Sublime One tells us to relinquish it, to put aside, and we will all eat together. Once the Venerable Sir, a certain man, would obtain soup during the day, and he would say, put that aside, and we will eat it together in the evening. Nearly all cooking is done in the evening, little by day. So obviously at the end of a day's work, etc., and the coolness of the evening, remember it goes dark 6-ish, 7-ish in the tropics, and the days are pretty even throughout the year. So round about 7 o'clock, when the light's gone, then you'd start the cooking and you'd have your meal. And of course, it would be the good meal of the day. But out of love and respect for the Blessed One, out of shame for fear of wrongdoing, we abandoned the night meal, which was outside the proper time, should be evening meal. As it happens, the bhikkhus, the monastics, wandering for alms in the thick darkness of the night, have walked into a cesspit, fallen into a sewer, walked into a thorn bush, and fallen over a sleeping cow. They have met hoodlums who have already committed a crime, and those planning one, and they've been sexually enticed by women. So this is the men. Yes. Once, Venerable Sir, I went wandering for alms in the thick darkness of the night, and a woman washing a pot saw me by the flash of lightning and screamed out in terror, "Mercy me, a devil has come for me." And I told her, "Sister, I'm no devil. I'm a bhikkhu waiting for alms." Then it's a bhikkhu whose ma's dead or whose pa's died. Don't quite know the meaning of that. Better, bhikkhu, that you get your belly cut open with a sharp butcher's knife than this prowling for alms for your belly's sake in the thick darkness of the night. So this woman's very upset by being frightened by this monk. And so how and because of all these little accidents that have been happening to the monastics, presumably that's why the Buddha banned it, asked them not to eat it in the evening, or at least that was one of the reasons. Now, there are some, of course, who were discourteous and did not follow the Buddha's rule. So he gives a couple of similes. So now, supposing someone said a quail were tethered by a rotting creeper, and would thereby expect injury, captivity, or death. So would that quail be able to escape that rotting creeper? No, Venerable Sir, for the quail, the rotting creeper by which it is tethered and thereby expects injury, captivity, or death, is a strong, stout, tough, unrotting tether and a thick yoke. So for them, for such people, it becomes something that stops their progress. So that's one. So in other words, those monks and nuns who don't obey, they're like this quail caught by this rotting creeper. But then suppose a tusker elephant with tusks as long as chariot poles, full grown in stature, high bred and accustomed to battle, were tethered by stout leather thongs, but by simply twisting his body a little, he could break and burst the thongs and go where he likes. So in the same way, those people who honor the Buddha, they will release themselves from the tethers, the tether of all that comes with eating and not obeying the Buddha himself. And so having abandoned it, we live at ease, unruffled, subsisting on others' gifts, with mind as a wild deer's. For them, that thing becomes a feeble, weak, rotting, coreless tether. So in other words, they are relinquishing the desire to eat in the evening. And then he gives two other examples. One is of a penniless, destitute man who had one dilapidated hovel open to the crows, not the best kind, and one dilapidated wicker bedstead, not the best kind, and some grain and pumpkin seeds in a pot, not the best kind, and one hag of a wife, I didn't write this, not of the best kind. He might see a bhikkhu in the monastery park sitting in the shade of a tree, and his hands and feet well washed after he had eaten a delicious meal, devoting himself to the higher mind. And he might think to himself, oh, how pleasant the recluse's state is, how healthy the recluse's state is. If only I could shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe and go forth from home to homelessness. But he's unable to abandon what he has, even though it's the dilapidated hovel and so forth. And so he is weak, feeble, weak, rotting, coreless tether. So he can't escape. On the other hand, we have a very rich merchant, great wealth and property with vast numbers of gold ingots, a vast number of granaries, a vast number of fields, a vast number of land, a vast number of wives, a vast number of men and women slaves. He might see the bhikkhu in the monastery park sitting in the shade of his tree, his hands and feet well washed after he had eaten a delicious meal, devoting himself to the higher mind. And he might think, how pleasant the reclusive state is, how healthy the reclusive state is. If only I could shave off my hair and beard, put on the yellow robe, and go forth from home life into homelessness. And he is able to abandon his vast number of gold ingots, etc., etc. So it doesn't matter seemingly what you have, it's the ability to let go. So finally, we have these 4 types of people, these 4 types of persons. So someone who practices the way to the abandoning of attachment, to the relinquishing of attachment. And when he practices this way, memories and intentions associated with attachment beset him. He tolerates them. He does not abandon them. He does not remove them. He does not do away with them and annihilate them. Such a person I call fettered, not unfettered. Now, this actually refers to everybody, it seems, up to the state of non-returner. Remember, there are those 4 levels of attainment: the stream entry, the person who's broken through the delusion of self; the once returner, the person who is still attached to the sensual world; the anagami, the non-returner, the person who's let go of the sensual world; and finally, the arahat, who's let go of everything. Then he says there's the person who practices the way abandoning of attachment to the relinquishment of attachment. When he's practicing this way, memories and intentions associated with attachment beset him. He does not tolerate them. He abandons them. He removes them, does away with them, and annihilates them. And yet, this person I call fettered. So here he's talking about that 3rd stage of attainment, the anagami, the non-returner. And the next paragraph is exactly the same, except that the person suffers some sluggishness. His mindfulness may be slow in arising, but he quickly abandons them, removes them, does away with them, and annihilates them. Now, just as an aside, in a book by Jack Cornfield called Living Buddhist Masters, unfortunately, I think virtually all of them are dead, so it has been renamed, but if you type that in, you'll get the modern version or the modern title. And in it, he very beautifully lists all these various teachers, all the various techniques that they use. And there's one person there called Sun Lung. And he was an uneducated farmer. And somebody came along and taught him how to do some breathing meditation. And he progressed so quickly that within a few months, he asked his wife if he could leave and become a monastic, and in so doing he became a fully liberated person. And he was asked, he did all this in a matter of 3 to 6 months, I can't remember exactly, but extremely quickly. And when he was asked, why is it that people don't become fully liberated, he says, because they're lazy. And I think if we look at our practice and if we're truthful with ourselves, we notice that we are at times sluggish. And then finally, of course, some person having understood that attachment is the root of suffering. Okay? Some person having understood that attachment is the root of suffering, divests himself of attachment and is liberated with the destruction of attachment. Such a person I call unfettered, and that, of course, is the arahat. So now the rest of the discourse is really just saying that one has to let go of sensual pleasures, and he doesn't have much of a liking for sensual pleasure. The pleasure and joy that arise dependent on the 5 chords of sensual pleasure, that's the 5 senses, are called sensual pleasure. A filthy pleasure, a coarse pleasure, an ignoble pleasure, I say of this kind of pleasure that it should not be pursued, that it should not be developed, it should not be cultivated, and that it should be feared. So remember, the pleasures of the senses come as a given of the human condition. The problem is attachment, and therefore we should be afraid of falling into the error of attachment. That's what the Buddha means here. So one way of doing that is to suppress them by doing the jhanas. And this is what the whole next section is about, just going through the usual description of the 8 jhana factors. And then finally, of course, do you see Udayin any fetter, small or great, of whose abandoning I do not speak? So basically, even when you get to all these jhanas, even they have to be abandoned. Anything to do with the phenomenal world, the world of the mind, the world of the body, eventually has to be abandoned. So that is the simile of the discourse is called the simile of the quail, which is only one of the similes, and it really is a sort of a reminder to us that the path to liberation is the path of relinquishment, the path of letting go of attachments. We don't have to berate ourselves because we occasionally fall into an indulgence, but just to keep reminding ourselves that, you know, we've got to give this stuff up. We've got to stop seeking happiness in the sensual world. That's the trick, to stop seeking happiness in the sensual world. So to make that distinction between the simple pleasure that food gives us, but using food in order to make ourselves feel comfortable, in order to make ourselves feel excited. That's where the attachment manifests. Using food other than for feeding the body, nourishing the body, and just allowing those pleasant tastes to arise and pass away. So don't forget, when it comes to food, at the end of a meal, you know, say to yourself, this is one less breakfast this last time, in this lifetime. This is one less lunch in this lifetime. This is one less evening meal in this lifetime. This is one less cup of tea in this lifetime. And slowly, just the drip of letting go will help us to relinquish everything. And in no length of time, we will be fully liberated from all suffering, hopefully sooner rather than later. So we can do a little bit of practice.